In this video, I'm going to try to break down the complex topic of Docker and try to make it very simple and very sort of practical on how to use it, what it is, and why you should use it for your development as a machine learning or a data scientist. This is the machine learning collection repository where basically everything I've ever done on YouTube is in this code. And in the README, I added some steps here on how to set up Docker. And so we're gonna use this to set it up, and I'm gonna guide you through that step by step. Before we go into the how, let me just tell you what Docker is. So Docker is just a tool to be able to run containers. And so the follow-up question is what is a container? And a container is very similar to a virtual machine in the way that it has its own operating system. It has all the packages in the specific container, all the scripts and everything. It's sort of disconnected from your local computer. And that is a very simple way of understanding Docker. So there are three concepts I would like you to understand. The first is a DockerFile, which is instructions on how to build this Docker image. So here we specify all the OS, we specify which Python version we want to install, all the extra packages that we might need, and so on. And then Docker image is when we actually build from that Docker file. So we create the image, sort of the .iso file for the container. And then the Docker container is actually when the image is being run. When we run that image, then it's something that we can actually use. So the container is actually in the final what we use. So we have Docker file, it builds a Docker image, and the Docker container builds a Docker image. I've seen some examples where people make it similarities to references to cooking, where the Docker file would be how to make cookie dough, and the Docker image is the cookie dough, and then the Docker container is the cookie, or something like that. So why should we use Docker? I think the main thing that you'll probably see is these memes of, well, it works on my computer. Well, then we should just ship your computer. It's very common if you're collaborating that you get things to work fine on your, let's say it's on a Mac, you're wanting to run it on Linux, and maybe you want to run it on Ubuntu 20.04, or now it's different when you're running it on Ubuntu 22.04 or on a Windows machine. So having all of it in that specific container, it simplifies all of that and reduces or removes that hassle. You can just give them the Docker container. You can say, here, run it in this one. Okay, so the second is portability. For me personally, as I've gotten to use VMs more and more, I need more GPU resources. I might spin up a VM that has all the GPUs that I need. And then for the portability, developing locally, but then when I need more resources, I'll spin up a VM with those resources, and then I'll just get my Docker container onto that VM, and I can run it. I don't have to install all the packages and all of that because it's inside that VM. And so another thing as well is when you start to learn about deployment and deploying on the cloud, you're gonna have to containerize your application. And also, you might have heard of Kubernetes, which is basically a way to manage your containers. If you're developing everything locally on Docker, then the step, right, to start to put it on the cloud, it's very low barrier. You basically already have it ready. So it's very easy to move from local development to deployment. Now we go to the the important thing, right? How do we use it? I'm gonna try to keep this a little bit high level and simple, but I'm still gonna guide you through it, how to set it up. But then there's a lot of details to learn in the future as well. But if we get everything running and we get an example, I think it's very easy to build from. All right, so let's now move to the steps. The first is that we want to install Docker. There's this link here, will bring you to the Docker engine. There's Docker engine, and then there's also Docker desktop. They're very similar, but Docker desktop has a user interface, which might be nice. Now the instructions differ a little bit. I think these are very good instructions though, so just follow these to install it on your specific. I would recommend you to install the Docker desktop if you are not on some kind of server. But what I'm gonna show you is setting this up on my server, which is where I do most of my development. So after you've installed that, this is a little bit optional, but if you have a Ubuntu server, for example, and you have CUDA, if you were gonna train something in the Docker container then you want to be able to, or inference, you want to be able to leverage the GPUs. And so follow these for setting up NVIDIA Container Toolkit. That will give the Docker container ability to use the GPUs. So in my case, in my server, I have 2 GPUs that I want to be able to leverage. As I said, right, we have, this is the machine learning repository. Here we have the DockerFile. And so let me show you an example of how that looks like. Basically, we start to build from something. And in this case, we're using the official PyTorch from Docker Registry. We can get and specify, or we want to build from PyTorch 2.1.1. We want to use CUDA and cuDNN 8, for example. I'll link that in the description below. This is the official one from PyTorch. And then we can do some run command. For example, here I'm doing upgrade pip. We could also do run, maybe an update, sudo app, update, we run with the keyword run. And then we specify a work directory here. As I said, everything, it's like its own machine that's run on top of yours, right? On your local one. So we specify, but they're disconnected, right? So code you have locally is not available in the Docker container. So what we need to do is we need to specify, okay, this is the work directory in the actual container that we're gonna use. So we're gonna create a directory called code. And then we can copy our requirements.txt file that we have locally to this directory code. And then finally, we can install those packages onto the Docker container. This is a very simplistic example. We start from this, we run upgrade pip, we create a directory inside the container, we copy a file to this directory, and then we run pip install requirements. And we have this no cache directory because we don't want to cache all of the things inside the Docker container. Then we can open up the requirements file. And here I've just specified, very basic. You could also specify the exact versions, right? And things like that. These are just some general things, libraries you might want to have for machine learning workflow. Feel free, to edit it exactly to the ones you actually need. This is just an example. All right, cool. So now when we have the Docker file, we can do Docker build. So let's call it my name, image, and then it's built from this directory, because here is where we have the Docker file and here's where we have the requirements.txt. And then it's going to take a while. It's going to run everything. It's going to install the things that we need. So let's just have some patience. Hopefully, this doesn't take too long. If we go back to the instructions here, right, as it's building it, after this, we'll have a Docker image. Now what we need to do is that we need to run it. Here, I've specified a lot of different things, and these are not exactly necessary. We do run, and then we can specify how we want to run it. So a common way is running it in a detached way. So this is that it won't actually, it's gonna run in the sort of the background. You can also specify to run it interactively. I'll show you the difference, but so basically we're running it and it's gonna be in the background. We're specifying we want all of the GPUs. Here's another command, which is we're specifying a volume mount to this Docker container. So as I said, right, we have our local and we have the container, and these are disconnected. So if we want to synchronize them, let's say we are changing something locally, but then we're gonna run it in the Docker container, we could specify a link between our local folder and everything we have there. So if we modify something, it'll also update in the Docker container folder, so the code that we have there. This is very important. We are specifying, the current directory here, and the mount is gonna be to code, because that is where we set the work directory. And then you can have a port. This is not really neat, but for Jupyter Notebook, for example. And then we can have a name. We can name it to my name container. If you're going to use Jupyter Notebook, you might get some token. You can specify the password, right? You can specify it to something, my token, and then it's going to run from this one that we just created. So my name, image. And then this last thing is just sort of a thing to keep it running. We're not, it's sort of a little hacky way to ensure that it is not gonna exit, so that we keep it running. All right, so if we run this now, after, right, you can look up all of these details, and there are more arguments as well. I just wanted to show you sort of a somewhat comprehensive way to run it, even though we're not going to use all of those. Now, you can use some commands, Docker images, and you can see, okay, we have my name, Aladdin image, and this is the one we created. Then we can do Docker. I think this is for selecting, you know, processes, and then we can get, all right, which ones are the running ones. So it was created 21 seconds ago and it's been running for 20 seconds. And then we could, the Docker is running in the background, right? But we could now sort of attach to it. So we could do Docker execute interactively this container. So now we are actually sort of inside this Docker, and we have this, we're in the work directory code. Since we did this mount, right, I can do something like this. I can do tmux. I have an actual tmux session here. All right, so since we actually created this container here, we can attach to it, right? We can do exec this. Now, because we actually attach it, so we're inside a Docker container, but since we attach the volume mount, if we change something in this one, for example, requirements, we can say hello, right? If we do now concatenate this requirements file, at the top, we'll see hello. So this is because we've attached this mount, which we did in this one. So this is probably the most important command actually. So now you can do your sort of development here, right? Let's say you modify, we go to ML, we go to PyTorch, we go to basics. Let's say we open up PyTorch simple fully connect. We have this fully connected first video I ever made, I believe, on Torch. We train a neural network on MNIST using a fully connected neural network. Then we can go, all right, we can go to this one as well, PyTorch, basics, and then we can do Python, PyTorch, simple fully net.py. And now we can run that. So we're running it inside a Docker container. We're not running it locally because, you know, we install all the packages inside a Docker container. We're not using Conda here, for example. Since we also I've installed this Docker NVIDIA Container Toolkit, we can also, you know, we have access to the GPUs similarly as we have, you know, in our normal. This is a way to change your development environment to use Docker. What are the actual benefits here? I can put this image, which has all of these packages on a Docker registry. So Docker registry, for example, here. And this is kind of like, you know, GitHub, but for Docker images. I can upload my Docker image here, and then I can easily pull it on any VM I spin up or on any other computer. And I can just use the same for all of my development, right? All right, I think this is it. Obviously, there are a lot of details that you can now learn as well. I mean, there's a lot of Docker commands, including, you know, how to run it. There's all these commands you can use in the DockerFile to set it up. There's all of these things to explore in this Docker registry. Like if I search PyTorch, I get this, and you can, this is an official one. We can check, all right, which ones have they uploaded? We have Docker images for all of them, even to old ones like 1.10.0 and all of these things. I'm gonna leave you to explore that and learn about that because I'm also still learning about that, but hopefully this gave you a start to use Docker containers and understand the essentials of what they are and what a Docker file is, what a Docker image is, the benefits of using it. All right, thank you so much for watching the video, and like the video if you thought it was useful, and I hope to see you in another video.